This segment is all about podcast production. Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Imperial, and the segment's brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals publish to educate consumers, grow their businesses, and to leave a legacy. Joining me on this segment is Tyler Sherman, who I met at Podcast Movement. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark, for having me on the show.
Tyler, tell us a little bit about your work and who are the types of folks that you help?
Sure. I work as a podcast producer. So what I do is I help shows get guests, and then I also help different guests who might not have a podcast appear on different shows. I work with a lot of the biggest shows out there. The first one that I started working with is called Concrete, and we have about 700,000 followers on YouTube alone. So my main focus is I work on a lot of true crime shows, and I also work with a lot of the young financial creators, such as I work with Brandon Schlichter from Investment Joy. We have over 1 billion views. We have 3 or 4 million followers across social media. I also work with Ryan Pineda. He has over 1 billion views and 1 million followers as well. So those are my two main specialties. I would say true crime and a lot of business. And we do have other kind of guests too on some of the shows. Sometimes we'll have authors on. We'll have people that are talking about cryptocurrency, and we've had UFO guests, all different kinds of people.
Right on. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges that your clients face, and a little bit about the role of a podcast producer? What do they seek out? What are they looking for help with specifically?
Sure. I would say some of the challenges are, I guess, always finding new and interesting guests. I would say one of the biggest challenges, I'm sure everybody's aware of this now, there's certain guests you can't even have on the show, because if you have somebody on the show, you could potentially get canceled, or or you can get shadow banned, different things like that. So, for example, one of the clients I'm working with, we have a contact with Roseanne Barr, so we were thinking about bringing her on. So initially, the host wanted to bring her on, but then he was concerned that maybe she might say something, and then the whole episode can get taken down, or you can get a strike or different things. So I would definitely say the freedom of speech and freedom of thought. And obviously, I don't agree with everything Roseanne says. She's had head injuries in the past. She says some pretty wild things. But I do feel that people should be able to speak, just as long as if they're not inciting violence or causing any direct problems. I really feel that, sunlight, is the best disinfectant. So if somebody's saying something that it's not factually based, or they have a crazy opinion, there's plenty of shows out there that can just show the counterpoint and just kind of make them look foolish. The more they speak, then the more they can be exposed. But I think that's definitely one of the biggest challenges. We're looking at some great guests to be on the shows, but then but we also always have to keep in the back of our mind the shadow banned or getting kicked off the platform. Like some of the people I work with, this is their full-time job. They've been doing this for many years. And then if you just have one guest on who whoever's in charge at the time, if they don't like them, they can really do a lot of damage. You can get demonetized. There's many negative consequences. So I think this really is very harmful with freedom of speech and just the exchange of ideas. You just have to be so careful. Obviously, if there's people that are clearly just causing problems, you don't want to platform them. And Sam Harris, he did a great video recently. He was talking about, I think, Bobby Kennedy Jr., when he was talking about the vaccines and different issues. And Sam Harris just gave a very thoughtful, did a very thoughtful discussion about that, because, Bobby Kennedy Jr., he does go on Rogan's show, he goes on other shows, but Sam Harris just gave a great reason why he didn't want to platform him, because Sam Harris, he had all the receipts, he was showing all the areas where maybe Kennedy's not arguing in good faith. So I would say that's probably one of the biggest challenges. And was there a second part for your question as well? You're saying, how do I help them?
Yeah, that really covers a big
Sure.
area, a huge
Okay.
area of matching them up with guests. When's the right time when does a host really know that it's time for a producer? Is it when they reach a certain size? Have you ever worked with beginning hosts? What does that look like?
Oh yeah, I've worked with people that started with no followers at all. One of my clients is Matt Cox. His podcast is called Inside True Crime with Matt Cox. So I started with him at the beginning when maybe he had 1,000 or 2,000 followers. Now we're up to over 150,000 followers on YouTube alone. This is probably over the course of 18 to 24 months, but I've been working with him since the beginning. I would say, I mean, like when you come across different people have different skill sets. Some people might be really great being interviewers, they might be very charismatic, but they might not be as good with the business part of it, following up with guests, meeting guests. And, and like you mentioned earlier, we met at Podcast Movement. So the great thing about Podcast Movement, Podfest, FinCon, all these different conferences is you can go up straight to these creators. Like I met Payne Lindsay and Donald Albright. They're from Tenderfoot. They have over 700, 800 million downloads in just the past few years. And you can just go up directly and talk with them. So I actually met Payne Lindsay and Donald at Podcast Movement last year in Dallas. I just went up to them. I talked to them briefly. And then probably about 8 or 9 months later, the timing was right. And I was able to book them on the Concrete podcast. So, but yeah, I guess to answer your question, I mean, I guess you just have to see what your skill set's like. If you're able to go to these different conferences where you can meet the top guests in the world, that's one determination. But I think it's good too. You should have a team as well because you can give different perspectives. And there's so many different videos, so much information out there. So the host, they can kind of focus in on different topics. But then if you have a producer or other people on your team, they can maybe pick up on different guests that might be good for your show. So it really just depends on your skill set and what you're good at. And you have to be self-aware. Like most people, they're not self-aware of what they're good at. But if you're able to have more people to your team and the people that you're adding to the team are maybe strong in areas where you're weak, that can really help the show grow a lot.
In terms of podcast production, have you experienced, people that have made any big, glaring, like common mistakes? What are some mistakes that like podcast hosts or producers or lack thereof of a producer? What have you seen mistakes people made that they could avoid?
Okay, definitely the number one biggest mistake is I've worked with all different kind of hosts and different shows. I work with right now I'm probably working with 10 to 12 different shows. The biggest show has maybe 5 million subscribers. That's Soft White Underbelly. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm working with people that are just kind of starting out. So I work with a whole range of different kind of people. I would say the number one mistake is you have to really prepare for the interview beforehand. And you have to have, I would say have at least 10, 15, 20 questions that are ready to go. You can really tell when a person has done thorough research on the guests. Just a conversation goes so much better. One of the clients that I work with is Johnny Mitchell. He has about 850, 900,000 followers in just the past year on YouTube alone. And if you go on YouTube and you check out his videos, you can tell he did extensive research on his guests. One of the people I introduced him to is Gil Carrillo. Gil's a lead detective for the Night Stalker case, and he was featured on Netflix. So if you check out that video, it's just a perfect example where Johnny did tons and tons of research on Gil, and the conversation was just really great. So yeah, I would say doing research is really important. Yeah, and the other thing too, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, was about self-awareness. Some hosts that I've worked with, they're just maybe they're not charismatic, they don't have a good personality. You have to be really likable for people to watch your show. And then another common mistake I also have seen is some hosts, they might have a theory or a thesis, kind of what they want to explain during the video. And then during the video I'm watching and they're kind of contradicting what their point is or what their thesis is. So they're kind of arguing against themselves. So definitely have like a clear message and understand, what you're going in there. I think another huge mistake that people are making now as well is everything is so polarized. Either you're on the left side, you're on the right side, you're supporting one issue or you're not supporting the other issue. I think to be a good host and do a really interesting show, you should be able to do your side of the argument, but then also do the devil's advocate, like do both sides of the argument, even though you might lean one way or the other. Or if you're not able to do that, maybe have another guest to give the counterpoint. But I just find it really boring when it's just an echo chamber and people are just kind of regurgitating all these same information. People want to watch these shows because they want to see both sides of the argument, do factual information, And that let the audience, obviously, they could do more research later. Oh, another huge mistake too. One of the shows I really like watching is Patrick Bet David. He has a really great podcast. So I would say 90-95% of what he does on the show is really great. But then sometimes they just get into these super wacky conspiracy theories. They had Anthony Weiner on a couple weeks ago, and they were having a very interesting conversation with him. And then they started asking Anthony Weiner about there's like a so-called Clinton kill list or something like that. So they started asking him that, and then Patrick Bet David was reading off names of different people that were associated with the Clintons who passed away, and it was just I don't know. It just seemed like it just was just pure conspiracy nonsense. So I just don't understand. Like Patrick Bet David and his group, they have so much to offer. Adam Sosnick's also great on the show. They just have so much to offer. But when you get into these wacky conspiracy theories, if you want to do a conspiracy show, do like a separate channel or something. But they're mixing straight politics, straight business, which they're so great at. But when they put these conspiracy nonsense things in there, I just shut it off. It just have no interest. It's just complete like nonsense.
That's really fascinating insight. Tyler, tell us a little bit about your background and what inspired you to get into this field. How did you get started?
Sure. Okay, yeah. So I started about 4 years ago. I met Matt Cox. He was helping me make some real estate related videos, and Matt was friends with Danny Jones at Concrete. So at the time, Danny had probably 300,000 or 400,000 followers on YouTube. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions of views. So I developed a good relationship with Matt, and then Matt introduced me to Danny, and Danny needed some help booking guests for his show. We actually got really, really lucky. The first guest I ever booked was Ben Mesrick. Ben's the author, and I think he might have also did the screenplay for the Mark Zuckerberg movie, Social Network. So just right off the gate, I just had really great success getting some of the top guests in the world. The way that I got interested in it was I grew up in the New Jersey and the New York area. So when I was growing up, Howard Stern was the biggest thing in the world. He was kind of like a crazy guy on the radio doing all kind of wacky things. I guess looking back on it now, though, just all the misogynistic things he did, the racist things he did. I guess looking back on it, I guess what he did was actually kind of terrible. But at the time, though, he was fighting against the I forgot the name. The people. What are they? What's the name of the people who look over radio? Whatever. There was some group, some government group that monitored radio, and if you said the wrong thing, they would kick you off the radio or fine you. I forgot the name is right now.
Oh, the
But
FTC or the.
yeah, the FTC. They would he'd always be in a battle with them. There'd be different fines. But yeah, so I was growing up, I listened to Howard Stern, so I just thought it'd be really interesting to work on his show. He would have the best guests in the world, ask some really interesting topics. So once again, like obviously looking back on it, I mean, I guess what he did was in terms of being kind to people. He crossed the line for sure, but just from an entertainment perspective and just having conversations, long form conversations. That's really the key thing, because on CNN or different news programs, they just give you have a minute or 2 minutes to get your point in there. So that I think that's really the thing. What I loved most about it. With the Howard Stern show, they could talk for 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours with the guest, really dive deep, ask some questions that the regular media wasn't interested in. So that was just always in the back of my mind. I always found it very fascinating. And I just find I just like everything about social media. I mean, I love watching the Instagram, YouTube, the videos. So I thought if I could be a part of it. And then I also find it really great when you can put, two people together that maybe would never have met before. Like I meet a great guest at Podcast Movement or FinCon or Podfest, and putting them together with a host, and then sitting back and kind of watching the interview. It's just really rewarding. Like one of my favorite people out there is James Altucher. He has a really great show. So through the different podcast movements and different things, I was able to become good friends with his producer Jay Yao, and he actually lives in Atlanta, pretty close to where I live. So I was able to get some really great guests on James' show. We booked Scott Dickers. He's the founding editor of The Onion. They had an absolutely amazing conversation. Also, Jamie Rojazinski. He's a guy that started Wall Street Bets. I was also able to put them together. That was another amazing interview. And then also recently we had Vernon Reid on. He's one of the founding members of Living Color. Everybody will remember the song Cult of Personality. So Vernon, he's really big into AI right now. So I was able to put James together with Vernon, and it was just an absolutely incredible interview. Yeah, you can go to James's channel to listen to it, but that's really the most rewarding thing when you put the perfect host and the perfect guest together, and it's just like it's just magic. And I just like I'm behind the scenes. Nobody knows my name. Before this, nobody knows who I am really. It's just great to sit back. I don't need any adulation or praise or anything. But as an avid watcher of the podcasts and YouTube and everything, it just feels great to be able to put these things together. And like a lot of other people too, I canceled my cable. I'm pretty much just listening and watching YouTube and other podcasts primarily, and just putting great content out there. And I also love reading the comments that people leave. So if anybody's watching a show, it really helps the person out a lot if you can leave a comment, subscribe, share it with people. But just great it's so rewarding when you're watching the comments and people are like, wow, this is such an amazing show. I never thought you guys would get together. It's just, that's the most rewarding thing. And the other thing too is, as we all know, I mean, everything on the internet is going to be there for eternity. So I'm putting together 3 to 5 different huge shows every single week. So, the next 10 years, 20 years, I could have 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 shows that I was able to put together that'll kind of be there, for the rest of history. People talk about legacy. That doesn't really mean much to me, but to be able to play a small part in putting these great shows together that the audience loves and watched by millions and millions of people, it's just that part is the most rewarding. Have something to show for your efforts.
For folks listening who are either creators or hosts or considering becoming a creator or host, and they'd love to speak with you and perhaps need the services of a podcast producer like yourself, how can they find you, connect with you, and learn more?
Sure. I can give you my cell phone. It's 914-438-8279, 914-438-8279. So please text me and then just let me know that you came across, or you found out about me through Mark's interview, and then we can set up a time to talk. Yeah, if you can include some information about what you're working on, what you're trying to do, that'll be helpful as well.
Tyler, this has been terrific. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with my audience today, and I wish you continued success for you and for all of your clients.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
That was Tyler Sherman, podcast producer, and this segment's been brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals publish to educate consumers, grow their businesses, and to leave a legacy. That's all for now. I'm Mark Imperial, and thanks for joining us.